Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to join you following my participation yesterday. I gather we've had a very productive morning, and I know we had a very nutritious lunch, and therefore we are now ready to participate in what is the closing phase of this conference. I've been asked to talk a little bit about public service broadcasting, reinventing for a new generation. And it is inescapable that the technology context within which public service broadcasting is now unfolding should be part of the foreground of what I have to say. We know about the dominant role of the internet and the increasing public uptake across continents and countries in respect of various uses of the internet. We've just crossed over the 50% of the world mark, and it is growing exponentially, having a major effect on the way in which people consume their media. This internet impact is reshaping our media world alongside features such as mobility and beginning to radically transform the marketplace. The context that I have often spoken about that we are in now is described as the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution, or 4IR for short, is characterized by a range of new and emerging technologies that are fusing the physical, digital, and biological worlds and impacting on a whole range of disciplines and our economy. You can see that what we're talking about here has to do with the emergence and increasing prevalence of what we call neural networks, networks that are built into the human nervous system. We are talking about artificial intelligence, algorithms, Internet of Things, the rise and multiple uses of drones, robots, and so on. All of those things constitute this amazing era that we are calling the fourth industrial revolution. Or we can contrast that with the conventional definitions of public service broadcasting. To use a Cambridge definition, television and radio programs that are broadcast to provide information, advice, and entertainment to the public without trying to make a profit. Right? So it speaks to viability, but not necessarily driving to profitability. It delimits, in the old way, its scope to radio and television, and it is about advice and entertainment. It was developed initially, the notion of public service broadcasting, very much by the BBC, who gave credence and popularity to this notion about media needing to inform, educate, and entertain. These words were formulated by the first director of the BBC, Lord John Reith, who is to this day very much associated with the notion of public service broadcasting throughout the Commonwealth and in many countries of the world. But one of the questions that continues to challenge public service broadcasting, if it is adopted in that form, is in what order should the priority be in respect of inform, educate, and entertain? And in many parts of the world and in many networks, the emphasis increasingly is becoming on the entertainment side. And is that part of what the new public service broadcasting landscape will look at? So that is the Lord Reith who established the notion of public service broadcasting as we know it, and someone described it as starting with the word broadcast is the old word for scattering seed. That's where the word broadcast came from. You cast it far and wide, and good things grow. As a preacher stands in the pulpit and hopes that the congregation will be improved by the word of God, so John Reith, the minister's son, cast the seeds of virtue into Britain. So that is the notion of that old-fashioned public service broadcasting. Built on technologies that were being innovated in the preceding 50 years or more, but coming into its own fruition in the 1920s and in the 1930s. The broadcasting era now is one that provides us with a whole array of new tools and technologies. But one of the points I want to very much make here this afternoon is that the tools and technologies that we are to deploy in public service broadcasting are no different than those used in digital commercial broadcasting. It is the content that we traffic through these tools and the versatility with which we use them that will make the difference between commercial and public service broadcasting. And the tools are very important because for many young people, the medium and the message are increasingly inseparable. People associate their information with their mobile technology or with their tablet, and those things become crucially interrelated. Among the emerging media trends are the ones that you will hear me talk a little bit about and which you might have heard a conversation about earlier in the course of today. But I'm saying here that what is emerging is less the conventional notion of public service broadcasting and a transformation into what I call public access media. That's really where we are headed, public access media. There are many of the tools and technologies that are now imposing themselves on this diversified, versatile, digital, internet-based public access media. These would include augmented reality, an enhanced version of reality where live, direct or indirect views of physical real-world environments are augmented with superimposed computer-generated images. The public service broadcaster cannot ignore the future in respect of that. The notion of 360-degree video, audiovisual simulation of an altered, augmented, or substituted environment that surrounds the user 360, allowing them to look around them in all directions, just as they can in real life. We are already familiar with the OTP technologies that are challenging our conventional ways of distributing content, and we are familiar with the disruptive effects of streaming technology that can undermine many of our conventional ways of distributing content. So many public broadcasters around the world are making major moves in the digital space to incorporate and take advantage of many of these things. Content, for example, for PBS is available on several platforms, iPad, iPhone, Xbox, Apple, and so on. And nearly 33 million unique visitors are attending to sites set up by PBS in respect of utilizing their new and available technologies. One of the areas we have tended to place a lot of emphasis on in public service broadcasting is what happens to children and what happens to persons with disabilities. And these are areas and parts of the population where increasing emphasis will now be placed in terms of the available technologies, such as PBS Kids and others. The Cyprus Broadcasting Corporation is among those also making important moves, and trying to move, and I have to say that in our environment in the Caribbean, one of the crucial enablers of public service broadcasting for the next generation has to be digital switchover. If we are going to be adopting and talking about a lot of the things that we are talking about, that it will need to be not in an analog, but very much in a digital environment to deal with the growing online and TV market. The BBC, through a whole range of other things, other technologies, continues to reinvent itself. We know about the BBC iPlayer, CBBS, and a whole range of other ways in which the technologies are emerging. Social media is a crucial part of the platform that has to be adopted in respect of public service broadcasting. In the United Kingdom, the Director General of the BBC recently observed that the TV youth audience in the UK has fallen by between 20 and 30%. Must mean something for how they tackle the future in respect of this question of meeting the audience where the audience may be found. Both Al Jazeera and NPR are doing similar things to renew their networks and to relate their content to the requirements of this increasing new generation. So what are some of the conclusions that we might draw in relation to this area? The nature and purpose of public broadcasting require that it be technology diffused and widely accessible by all citizens, especially those with special needs. Distribution tools identical to commercial broadcasting are required. Public broadcasters are uniquely positioned to offer alternative content to that which is available via commercial media, although I'm saying the tools will remain the same. Traditional notions of public service broadcasting are being transformed into public access media by rapidly changing technologies. As millennials and Generation Xers are consuming media in significantly different ways, then all of us in the Commonwealth and beyond will need to look quickly at how we might adapt to these particular changing environments. Crucially, public funding for public service broadcasting remains a challenge. I think creative ways will need to be found to look at that. In our context, we do not have the benefit of the public subscription based on usage. We don't have a large pool of government resources to count on, and therefore creative ways have to be found even as we are using these particular new technologies. I think the involvement of some level of advertising is likely to be and is already part of the mix, and that is something that we have to continue to look at. The values entailed in traditional public service broadcasting, fairness, universal access, content diversity, balance and accuracy in reporting are things that we should be valuing, notwithstanding the changing technology and the changing environment. And to transform this. Right. To close, I just want to remind us of something said in 1924, but which can be converted into a relevant statement for our present era. Broadcasting has a responsibility to bring into the greatest possible number of homes, and if we simply substitute devices in the fullest degree, all that is best in every department of human knowledge, endeavor, and achievement, we will be able to reach our goals. In other words, it's not so much about everything into the individual homes, but in an era of mobility and digital technology, we have to get these messages out through the various devices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. He only overran by 48 seconds. Professor Dunn has started off by giving us an insight into the uptake of the internet penetration. We've crossed over 50% access around the world. And he goes on to describe this phenomenon as the fourth industrial revolution, 4IR. He goes on to define public service broadcasting, being radio, television, basically addressing issues of information, education, and entertainment. And defines broadcasting ab initio as the scattering of seeds, like a farmer throwing the seed all over the place and then hoping that they will germinate and bear fruits. He goes on to also tell us that the tools for broadcasting, either public or commercial, remain the same. What is different is mainly the content of the broadcast. And he actually brought us a new terminology, public access media, rather than just public broadcasting. Public service broadcasting must take cognizance of the existing platforms for information dissemination. And therefore, the public broadcaster must put its content on all available platforms, the social platform, and so on. Funding still remains a problem, and is advocating alternative means or creative means of funding. Well, suggesting that a mix, because government may not be able to fund public broadcasting wholly. It could be a mix of donations, some part of advert, which is a controversial issue in public broadcasting. The commercial broadcasters insist that a public broadcaster being funded by government or donations should not touch advertising revenue intake. So he has done quite a good job on the subject. I think we should give him a bigger round of applause.